This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Clear your calendars. The Saints are returning and fans are looking for a championship team. At the very least, the team will be playing in a newly refurbished Superdome that is already proclaimed to be a winner. We will also be looking at the life of Sybil Morial, a respected activist who was also the wife and mother of 2 mayors. Plus, we will issue a warning: if you are going to the Gulf, watch out for the sharks. They are plentiful, and there is an effort to do something about that. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Mike Smith, staff writer, the Times Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate; Robert Collins, political columnist for Verite News Service and commentator for WVUE TV Fox 8; and Jeff Duncan, sports columnist, the Times Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, and analyst for Fox 8. All right, going first over to Jeff, because football season is upon us, and so the Saints have their first regular season game coming up.
Yeah, it's always an exciting time of year. You know, week 1, season opener at home in the Superdome. But I'll have to say, this has been more of a muted offseason, I think, from a fan perspective than I really ever remember. I think expectations are so low with this team, relatively speaking, compared to the days of the Drew Brees, Sean Payton era when the team was a Super Bowl contender. It feels like fans are a little more in wait-and-see mode, kind of prove it, because I think they had their hopes dashed the last couple of years where expectations were higher and the team really disappointed. So it's really unusual to see the Saints going into a year like this with not being the hunted, but kind of being one of the teams that's being overlooked nationally. I think they're 100-1 long shots to win the Super Bowl. Of course, we have the Super Bowl here this year. It would be an amazing story if they were to somehow upset the apple cart and make it that far. But year 3 for Dennis Allen, very important year for him. Because they've been disappointed, they haven't made the playoffs now in 3 straight years. I think it's a make or break season for him. I think he knows that. I think this team has to get to the playoffs, or at least have a winning season, improve upon last year, to keep his job and at least keep momentum locally, because right now even ticket sales are down. I mean,
really?
they've sold out, I think it's been 20 straight years, almost all the way back pre-Katrina. Season tickets have been sold out. I've heard more stories from friends and people in the neighborhood, anecdotally speaking, they're giving up their tickets. It's an expensive proposition, or they're reducing their ticket numbers. That did not happen 5-10 years ago. So I think it's just a testament to the lack of interest in the team right now.
Last year, there was a lot of anticipations for Derek Carr right off the bat, and people were excited about that, but he got hurt a lot and quickly. I mean, it was a lot of big injuries to big stars last year.
Yeah, it's part of the game, but he played through a lot of injuries, and so I think that's a question mark. I think if you're a Saints fan and you're excited about the season, the thing you hang your hat on is they do have an entirely new offensive system that's been brought in. They're not running the old Sean Payton, Drew Brees offense anymore. They've ran that for 17 years. And now they're bringing in Clint Kubiak, who's the son of Gary Kubiak, who's a longtime NFL coach. It's going to be a whole new scheme, a whole new system, and hopefully a better and more improved offense, because I think that's one of the problems that fans have is they were used to those teams of Brees and Payton, high scoring, fun. You go to the Dome, it's like a big party, stand up and get crunks being played, and you're scoring in the 30s and 40s, and this team isn't like that. And certainly the past 2 years, it hasn't been like that. So maybe this new offense will kind of reinvigorate things with Alvin Kamara, with Derek Carr, like you said, Errol. They need to get the fans and the excitement back in the Dome because it's been missing lately.
So what is the feeling then in the locker room? You're there, you're interacting with all of these guys. I mean, what's their feeling, particularly as compared to the other years too? Are you sensing a difference?
Well, I was talking to Cam Jordan and Tyrann Mathieu this week, and those are 2 of the old OGs, if you will, on the team, and two of the legendary players in the locker room. They're excited. I mean, they know in the NFL there's a razor-thin margin, difference between being 11-6 and 6-11, and so you never know in your year, and when things fall in place. And I do think there's an opportunity for this team, if things go right, for them to win the division, get back in the playoffs, and then you never know what can happen. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, great example. Last year, I went down to Tampa in the second to last week of the season. The Saints destroyed the Bucs on their home field, really dominated that game, and Tampa Bay ends up winning the division. They get in the playoffs, they win a playoff game, and they go to Detroit, and they're basically one play away from getting to the NFC Championship game. You never know, and this team's certainly talented enough, but a lot of things have to go right for this team, and typically you don't have everything fall into place.
Well, that's the thing, and like you said, injuries happen,
Right.
And so you never know what's going to be happening during the course of your season.
How about the kicking game? It's kind of like an overhaul on the special teams.
Well, you got a new punter, another Australian punter that's becoming something of a trend in the NFL. But Blake Grupe is back as the kicker, and there's a whole new kickoff rule that'll be different for fans. They go to the game on Sunday. It's a totally different setup. I think it's probably a positive move to try to reduce injuries around the league, and also to have the kickoff return to the game. Everyone in the past was always just going to the end zone, and it was the play had been somewhat eliminated from the game. Now I think you're going to see a little more strategy on kickoffs. But look, I think that I don't want to be completely a wet blanket here. I think this team has an opportunity to be good, and mainly because the division is not very good right now. I mean, it's wide open for the taking. I know everyone thinks Atlanta, the arch rival, is the team to beat, but I think the Saints definitely in week 4 or 5 they play Atlanta, and I think if they can get to that point through this early tough schedule and not be 1-4 or something right off the bat, I think this team has a chance to make a run. This early schedule will be critical, getting through the early part, because I think there's a little bit of a crisis of confidence. The team hasn't won the last couple of years. They've got to win early, I think, to kind of keep things together. It could snowball if they go 1-5 or something. It could be one of those years.
But season opener this weekend?
Yep, it should be a sellout crowd, I expect, and a game the Saints should win, and try and get some confidence here early in the season. The Carolina Panthers were probably the worst team in the league last year.
Besides the division teams, what's the big game you're looking for?
When Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos come to town here October 17th, it's on national TV. It's a Thursday night platform. That'll be a magical game. Drew Brees is being inducted into the Saints Hall of Fame that night. So he'll be in the building with Sean Payton and all these former coaches and players from New Orleans that followed Sean to Denver. It's going to be a pretty electric atmosphere.
Okay, Saints get going, and we all got to be a believer. See how it works out. Okay, Jeff, thanks a lot. Robert, over to you, because we had the loss of such a strong, loving matriarch to our city. Sybil Morial passed this week. Such a wonderful lady.
Very sad day in New Orleans politics. Losing Sybil Morial, who is not only the matriarch of a political dynasty, who is not only a former first lady herself, but was a civil rights icon in her own right. And I think what's especially sad about this from a historically significant standpoint is this sort of turns the page. She was the last of the black political icons that came into power in the mid-1970s. They're just about all gone now. So it's a very sad day.
And we have her talking about all of the work that she did, what she lived through. We did an interview with her for our show, The Vote Louisiana Women Lead. This was 4 years ago. So we have an excerpt of that interview. Here you go with Sybil Morial.
My growing up in a segregated city really was forming my attitudes for the future. Being held back, being denied, being said you can't. And then when I went to college, I went to Xavier University here, historically black college, for 2 years. But I wanted to go north. I wanted to experience a different life. And so in my junior year, I transferred to Boston University. One of my classmates and friends was Martin Luther King. And we would meet at our social events and talk about what was coming in the South. And every one of us, even though we loved the freedoms of the North, we all determined we were going back south because we wanted to be part of the change. And I was home with 2 toddlers, and I couldn't wait for him to come home to tell me the real skinny on what was going on. And I guess in my mind, I said, well, you know, I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be out there. The vote was what we needed. We had to get enough African Americans to have the vote, to have a voice at the table. And back then, voter registration was a big process. We knew League of Women Voters was doing voter registration, but they rejected us, not because some of them did not want us to join, but because there was state law that said whites and blacks could not meet together. So when we were rejected, we started our own voter registration workshops, we call them. So on Tuesday nights, we went to our assigned place and we talked to people. They were hungry to vote. And we reviewed all that they would have to do, encouraged them to go down to the voter registration office. And some of them had to go 2 or 3 times, but they never gave up. And we were so personally rewarded that they were so eager to become voters. That was the beginning of my full participation in the changes that were coming about.
Sybil Morial, the history that she lived through, and then the history that she made.
Yeah, so first of all, full disclosure. Okay, so my dad was actually roommates with Dutch Morial in law school. They were roommates at LSU Law School class in 1954, and my mom was actually at Xavier Prep High School with Sybil Morial. They were at high school together. So I've been around, grew up with the Morial kids, been around the Morial family my whole life. And I think, you know, what a lot of people forget is that, you know, the entrance into politics that the black politicians had at this time was different than the white politicians. The black politicians didn't have, you know, the access to the old political machines like the RDO and et cetera. These were all civil rights folks. They were either civil rights lawyers or they were black ministers. They were ministers that organized, you know, their churches for the civil rights movement. And so, you know, in the late 60s, early 70s, you saw all these civil rights leaders realizing that just litigating and just organizing wasn't enough. They were actually going to have to organize politically and get elected and actually hold political office, hold the levers of power to bring about equal rights. And so that's where you saw them entering into politics. And so Dutch, you know, supported by Sybil, they were sort of on the vanguard of that effort, and you saw a whole generation of politicians, of black politicians, who were also civil rights leaders, come in behind them.
No, you heard her say, you know, she had her toddlers at home, and he would come home after being really active, and she would want, as she put it, the whole skinny on it. So she was determined that she was still going to be involved in this whole movement, you know, for herself, but for those children she was raising.
Sure, and you know, and you can see what a great job that she did with each one of those children. Each one of them are successful in, you know, in their own right. You know, not just our former Mayor Mark, but, you know, she has, you know, one is a judge, one is a physician,
right.
And, you know, so they're all leaders in their fields, and so she did a great job. I always like to say, Sybil was a political strategist, but she was above politics. You know, she knew how to be a cutthroat political operative when she needed to be, but you never thought of her in that term because she was so sweet, she was so nice, she was so disarming, you know, that you didn't think about it, but she was so she managed to be a tough political operative without becoming jaded about politics or without, you know, developing the hard edge that a lot of politicians develop.
But you'd mentioned the old primarily white organizations. There was a new group of organizations that the primarily black organizations like Bull and Soul and Coop that emerged. I think they were fueled by the Voters' Rights Act, you know, which put more people into, and they're the ones that really began to control politics.
Sure. So the old, we call them the alphabet soup organizations, right? Life, coup,
Tips,
Soul Bowl, etc. They came about specifically because that the black politicians couldn't get into the white political machines, into the Morrison machine and those other machines. So they said, well, we've got to have our own organization. So they started developing their own organization. Now, of course, a lot of people would argue that they started squabbling amongst themselves once they organized themselves, and that kind of cut their political power. But yes, but that was but it was important, and of course, Dutch founded Life, and Life continues to exist today.
Let me just jump in here also, because Sybil was also very active in getting women involved in politics, and then she really opened a pathway for women. And in our program, we concluded with her comment where she's saying to women, "It's now your turn." Just such a, as you said, very, very nice and sweet, elegant, dignified, but very strong too.
Exactly.
And you wanted to talk about Dutch Morial.
Yeah, well, I want to mention that two women that distinguished themselves is Sybil, who was the mother of a mayor and the wife of a mayor, and Vernal Andrew was the same with
Right.
Exactly.
yeah, with them.
Well, let's talk about Dutch.
Which was sort of the precedent set by Abigail Adams, being the mother of a president and
That's true.
of two presidents. Driving all this, of course, the most visible part of it with Dutch Morial. Now, thinking about his career, I mean, he was really very dogmatic, very powerful man. He was inaugurated on May 2nd, 1978. That's the day he was inaugurated. It was a big thing, the first black mayor, Dutch Morial. May 3rd, huge rains, and what became known as the May 3rd flood developed. So his first full day on the job, it flooded. All right, and this was a serious flood. This was
major flood.
This was like an urban flood like nobody ever saw before, and people became aware of all the drainage problems we had. So a good bit of his first term was spent, dealing with that sort of thing. But in the shadows approaching that coming February with the police strike, the Mardi Gras police strike, which was very, very divisive, and I think it was very, very historic in that a lot of people thought there'd be a real racial divide in this, like that the whites would be against Morial, who wanted to stand firm against the police, and that the whites would be with the police, but they stood behind Morial. I guess part of it was because of a passion for Mardi Gras, but at the same time, with everything, Morial took some very firm stands on this, saying against the police, especially a friend of his told me it was very painful to him because he had at one time been an attorney, a union attorney for the police, and they have to stand against them. And a very historic moment to me was that day there was this press conference, and they had all the crew captains, and there was the Dutch Morial, and the captain of rec says, "We stand behind the mayor, okay? We will not be held hostage by the Teamsters Union." And I thought that was just a very important moment in social history.
That's right.
And Dutch always felt grateful.
Yeah.
Certainly, a family that definitely has an important place, the Morial family, in New Orleans history, in Louisiana history, and our sincere condolences to the family. I know they love their mom and their grandmom dearly, and we're so sorry for their loss. Thanks, Robert, and thanks, Eve. Let's go on over to Mike now, because now we're going to talk about sharks. Sharks in the Gulf. That always gets everybody's ears perked up. Do we have a problem with sharks in the Gulf?
Well, it seems we do. It's not a kind of Roy Scheider Jaws problem, I don't think, but it's more of a, I guess from one perspective, a nuisance issue, especially when it comes to people who go fishing offshore. This has been a concern for a while. The populations of blacktip and bull sharks have been increasing, according to a lot of anecdotal data and some federal assessments. They basically steal the fish off the line and off the hooks before the fishermen can get them into the boat. And they also wind up on the hooks themselves, and the fishermen have to sort of grapple with them to get them off and harm them in the process. So it's a range of things, and some of them say it even ruins. We're giving up red snapper fishing, for example, because of this issue. So the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries said, okay, what we're going to do is eliminate the recreational limits on catching these sharks. Not many people go after these sharks recreationally. Not a lot of people eat them. You have to kind of really clean them properly and quickly to make them taste okay. But some do. So they're hoping this might have a little bit of an effect. I don't think there's a widespread belief that it's going to put a big dent in the numbers, but they're thinking it could help a little bit.
Is there any outcry about this? I mean, has there been concern about shark population, of it being diminished too much?
We haven't heard much opposition to it yet. There's been a little bit of concern. Some people have called for, kind of what's the data showing the shark increase, and two, how are you all going to monitor this to make sure we're not doing, as you said, because we did have a problem with plummeting shark numbers like in the 80s that put these regulations in place, and that's caused the population to expand. The Department of Biologists say they're going to keep an eye on it. They point to these federal assessments showing they're not in any danger of being overfished. Interestingly, there's also sort of maybe a climate change connection to this. There's been a study out of Alabama showing the warming of the waters makes it more suitable for bull sharks in the northern Gulf. So that's allowing them to expand more, and that could be another.
So these aren't the great white sharks that people see in the movies. These are what bull sharks and what blackfin sharks.
Black tips, yeah, like little black, the tip of their fin has black on it. A lot of people who fish around here probably have seen them before.
Bull sharks can get pretty darn big, though, and aggressive as well. Is there any size limit on the fishing?
So there used to be, recreationally, there used to be a 54-inch size limit. So that's going to be done with now. Commercially, there was never a size limit, but there was a 45 number that you could take per day. That's going to increase to 55 now. It had actually already been 55 on a temporary basis. This will make that permanent. And a lot of the commercial ones caught actually get sent to Mexico, where there's a pretty big market for it, apparently.
Do we have a real problem with shark attacks in our Louisiana Gulf waters?
Not really. It's more of the fisherman issue. You do occasionally see some shark bites. There was those guys a couple years ago who were stranded in the Gulf, and they said they were being bit by blacktip sharks. The biologists thought that the sharks were mistaken their fingers for other fish, and they thought maybe that was a reason why. It's very unusual for any type of shark attacks to occur here, but they do happen.
Of course, there are those that say that sharks are misunderstood and really aren't as dangerous or aggressive as we fear them to be. Well,
I think that's true, yeah.
There's still not a lot of people that want to go swimming with sharks. Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. All right, Jeff, over to you, because the Superdome has a new look.
Yes, I don't know if it's an extreme makeover, but it's a pretty major refurbishment, $540 million total. It's really been a multi-phase project over a couple of years, and it's just about completed. There's still some minor things left. The Saints opener obviously was the target date. There's some minor things they've got to get done. For the most part, though, there's really two different parts of this renovation that I think fans are gonna notice when they go into the building on Sunday. If you didn't already go to the preseason game this past week, and that is, there's a lot more vertical transportation in the building, gets you from the ground floor up to your different levels. There's new club access, new club lounges that are really kind of modernized the experience. They've really opened up the concourses around the building. They're just wider, there's more points of sale for concessions, more like grab-and-go type concessions so you don't have to wait in line. Sort of modernized the fan experience at the games right now. And that was a big emphasis by the New Orleans Saints. They wanted to make it more fan-friendly going to the games. There's been additional restrooms have been added around the building, and a new commissary. That's more of a back-of-the-house type of addition, but they've upgraded the food service in the building, which I know will be accepted by most fans, because that's been a complaint for a while. We live in this world-class food town, and the food at the Dome has always been criticized for the quality. I think they're going to see a much improved concession availability throughout the building. And then the other things that were important for the NFL, because we are getting a Super Bowl, this was all tied to the Super Bowl this year, is they improved the locker rooms in the building. In the past, if you ever had been in the visitors' locker room at the Superdome, it was funny. The home locker room was state-of-the-art, classic, great locker room. The visitors' locker room, not so much. And the NFL would complain, saying, well, look, we can't have a Super Bowl here and have one team in a bad locker room. And so there's actually a brand new visitors' locker room. The Saints themselves have put up millions of dollars, Gail Benson, to improve their locker room. They have a new locker room, some new meeting and office spaces down around their locker room area. So a lot of different things, nothing one major thing, but just a lot of different improvements.
And so you say vertical transportation up to the upper levels. By that you mean?
Extra elevators, escalators in particular, those old ramps that we used to see in there. Last year, they took them out on the east side of the building, which was the side closest to Champion Square. This year, it's all new on the west side, the other side of the stadium. So it's easier to get vertically up and down, and that was a big problem. I mean, the dome just was outdated with vertical transportation. It was actually an ADA problem that they had. They've improved that as well. And there's also some things that I noticed there's some new ribbon boards, and what I mean by those are kind of the lighting along the side of the stadium, along the field. Those are all brand new. It's much brighter in there now. They've improved the lighting, so when you go in on Sunday or an upcoming game, you'll notice it's brighter in the building. I know that makes our photographers at the Times Picayune very happy.
All right, getting ready for the Saints and, of course, the Super Bowl, but also there's a pretty big act coming to town in October. That's going to be over there, too.
Yes,
of course, Taylor Swift. Okay, other stories. E.
The city has an office called the Office of Nighttime Economy. Its purpose is to deal with kind of like problems, primarily in the tourist industry at night. But they're working on a program with parking lot operators to have discounts for people who work late in the quarter, like service people and musicians. It's based on a problem in Austin to make things a little bit more pleasant for them and a little bit less expensive. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, it does indeed. All right, Mike, over to you.
So the saltwater intrusion is back, and that's something to keep an eye on, especially for Lower Plaquemine. The Corps of Engineers is building another sill in the Mississippi River to block this, and the parish is installing some filtration machines to deal with it in the lower part of the parish, so we have to keep an eye on that.
Indeed. All right. Robert?
A source on the city council tells me that the mayor's attorneys are currently in direct negotiations with the U.S. Attorney's Office to have her plead guilty to a lesser charge in the Vappy case and to resolve the charges once and for all. So we'll see whether or not they can cut a deal.
Well, that would be big news indeed. Okay, we were looking for that, Robert. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, next Thursday, September 12th, the Greater New Orleans Sports Foundation hosts their annual honors banquet, and they're going to induct Gail and Tom Benson into their Hall of Fame, and very special guests coming to introduce Gail Benson. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell will be here. Our favorite son. Everybody in New Orleans loves Roger Goodell, right? But he'll be in town, and I'm sure he's going to do a look around to see how the city's doing as it prepares for Super Bowl.
Well, there's a lot of work going on around town to make it look good, that's for sure. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for joining us here around our table, and thank you guys for watching. And, of course, we say go Saints, and we'll be looking for you guys next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.